bound.
Hey guys, Eric Tarr here for theproaudiofiles.com. In this video I'll be demonstrating how to use compression to control the dynamic range of a mix. So far in this project I've been using the iZotope Ozone 5 plugin to clean up and prepare my mix using some basic processing. Here's what I've got so far.
Trouble bound. We hit the town. I'll never forget.
So one thing that I haven't covered so far that's one of the most important aspects of the mastering process is controlling the dynamic range of a mix. This essentially means controlling how loud your song is. And if your song's going to be up on the radio against other songs or competing with songs on iTunes or on CD, you want your song to be really loud without clipping. So this is usually done in two parts during mastering. First is with compression that I'll demonstrate here, and second is with limiting, which I'll be covering in another video. So let's get into the plugin. I can show you some tricks that you can use. Switch on the dynamics module here and turn it on. Right now it's in multiband mode, which means there are 4 frequency regions that are going to be, you can compress separately. If you don't want to do this, you can always turn it off if you prefer broadband or wideband compression with a single band. Another thing that I'll do is open up my graph here because I want to make sure my dynamics module is after my exciter. My exciter is probably going to be adding some harmonics from the low frequency region to the low mids and that kind of stuff. So I want my dynamics to be responding to my exciter. That's just a matter of personal preference, but it's a good place to start. So I'll close that now. All right. I'm going to show you a couple different techniques that you can apply in all sorts of different ways when you're in mastering, and I'll talk about each one of them, how they work, and what you can use them for. So to begin with, I'll start out in my low frequency region, and I've noticed that I want this region to be a little bit more punchy. So I'll solo it. You can listen to it. So I want to help my kick drum and my bass guitar out a little bit by just giving a little bit more emphasis and energy. So what I'm going to do is focus on the compressor right here. Use a ratio, 2:1 or 3:1 at the most. Again, with mastering, you want everything to be very subtle, so don't use very high ratios, very low thresholds either. So in this kind of compression, I want to back off the attack so that the transient goes through the compressor, but then I am compressing the sustain. So back off the attack a little bit. I'm going to switch over to the gain reduction trace and watch the waveform and see the gain reduction taking place, see how much attack or release I need to change depending on the tempo of my song. Back down the threshold. Looks good. Let's hear what that's doing to my low end. A little bit more muddy right now when I bypass it. A little bit more punching if I add back in the gain reduction. Makeup gain here. About 2 dB. Make sure that I'm not losing my low end by doing the gain reduction or compression. Cool. Next up, I'll focus on the low mids. Here what I'm going to do, because this is where my vocal region is, where a lot of the melodic instruments are, I want this to be very subtle kind of compression. Switch over to this one. So what I'm going to do here is use a very, very low ratio, 1.1 to 1. And then what I'm going to do is drop the threshold such that almost all the signal is having a little bit of gain reduction taking place on it. You'll notice that the dynamic range, I'm just shrinking it by a little bit. This is going to be a very, very subtle way of doing compression. Nonetheless, it's going to sound very natural, and just drop the dynamic range ever so slightly.
Trouble bound. We hit the
So the signal is almost always being compressed.
I'll never forget.
Might even speed up the release time so it's responding very quickly. Maybe a little bit too fast. I want it to be smooth here.
Woke up just in time.
Very, very natural, very, very subtle kind of compression. Another thing that you can play around with is trying out the peak, RMS, and envelope. They're going to offer you different kinds of compression, how the compressor responds, whether it's be to the peaks of it or like the envelope of the signal or just the average energy. So I'll try out some of these.
Trouble bound.
Just another variable to play around with when you're working with the compressor. Next up, the high mids. One thing I'm going to switch over here to just to demonstrate is from the stereo mode to mid-side mode. And, this was actually going to affect all different frequency regions together. But nonetheless, I'll just demonstrate it for this one. And mid-side processing allows you to compress what's going through their right and left channel separate from what's basically going through both of them, what's going to be perceived in the center, in the mid channel here. So in this case, what I want to do is allow the things on the side to breathe a little bit more, to not be compressed, but then compress what's in the center. All right, this is if you need to control how loud things like the vocals are. You can compress using mid-side processing without affecting your stereo image. All right, so let's look at this. Maybe I'll do another 2-to-1 ratio and use a very, very long release. This would simulate kind of going back to the days of the SSL kind of bus compressor where you have the auto mode, which the auto release, which is very, very long release. It's just going to act more as a smoother and back off the attack. So even if there's a long attack, if there's a really, really long release, there's a potential that the transients are going to be compressed by the release more than by the attack. So we'll just try out this a little bit. Switch over to this mode.
Trouble bound. We hit the town. I'll never forget that sound. Tonight I fell asleep.
So if ever you're working on your mastering and you find that there's a lot of sibilance in the vocals, and maybe your snare drum is also a little bit too loud, if you compress the upper mids like I'm doing right here, using this kind of processing with the mid band processing, assuming your vocals and snare are panned to the center, this is a way to control that level independent of your stereo image of things like cymbals and that kind of stuff. So just another trick for you guys to experiment with. Last, I'll show up in the really, really high frequencies up here. What I'm going to do is very, very fast attack, very, very fast release, squash the transient of this part, just as a way of making the really, really high frequencies a little bit less harsh. All right, so I'll play around with this one. Bypass it. A little bit more harsh.
Just in time with chips darting down my spine. So take me down, and my feet will follow wherever my heart goes. I'll come around like I always. I'll get my feet on the ground.
So those are several different techniques that you can use for compressing at the mastering stage to control the dynamic range of your mix. Stay tuned for the next video where I'll be discussing how to tighten up the low end of your mix and make your mix larger than life by using stereo imagers.